Welcome back. This isn't going to surprise you. Stress and poor mental health are one of the biggest public health challenges that we're facing, and it is Stress Awareness Month. Now, studies have found that almost 3/4 of the UK adults have felt so stressed that they can't cope. And 1 in 14 feel stressed daily. You might be one of those people. As I said before, April is recognized as Stress Awareness Month to bring to attention to the negative impact, because there's good stress and bad stress, the negative impact of stress. Managing stress is an essential component of a healthy lifestyle. But how do you do that? Joining me in our studio in London, I'm delighted to say, is Dr. Rana Al-Falaki, who's an optimal performance strategist, who joins me now. Rana, and as I said before, there's good stress and there's bad stress. Obviously, we're talking about Stress Awareness Month is the stress that renders people, they can't do anything. They're sort of stuck. So let's define what we mean by stress.
Great, thank you, Trish. I think it's really important to do that actually as a starting point, and to understand that stress is a natural thing. It's your ability to withstand physiological, biological, and mental forces. And when we feel stress, we actually need to feel stress. So when you talk about good stress, I think it's really important to understand that stress is not bad. And that's where people actually often fall down. Stress is there for us to be able to survive. If we're standing in front of a bus, stress is what makes us run out of our way. If we lose a child in a shopping centre, if we've got a deadline to work with, then we actually undergo and feel stress in order to survive, in order for our blood flow to increase, in order for our pupils to dilate, in order for our heart rate to accelerate, to deal with things. Where it becomes bad is when it's what we call chronic stress. So when we have these episodes of stress, we need to then have periods of recovery. So it's just like a grid. We get a spike of stress, we need a period to recover. The problem and the ill health comes when that stress is sustained, when we're above that curve all of the time, that there's no time for recovery. You asked the question, what can we do about it? And I don't really want to talk about the typical things that everyone would know about slow breathing and mindfulness, because the reality is, when you're feeling so stressed, you don't really feel like doing that. You're in action mode. You want to get on and do something.
Thank you. Because I get so perturbed when people say, if you're stressed, slow breathing, look into the mirror, tell yourself you're wonderful and what have you, where you're so knackered, if I say, so exhausted, because stress interferes with your sleep. And it builds up. So that stress, that 3 o'clock in the morning, that churning, by the time real chronic stress sets in, you don't have the wherewithal to do slow breathing or look into mirrors and do all of that stuff, do you? I mean, you're literally paralyzed with stress.
Yeah, you're doing one of two things. You're either in that brain fog, loss of focus, poor productivity, poor creativity, not ultimately being yourself. It's affecting your relationships, it's affecting how you communicate, and the bottom line is you then can potentially spiral into a depression. Or you get the burnout, which is the opposite side, where you're so used to doing that you don't allow yourself any rest time. You don't even know what rest time means, and you're in high levels of action. So the one tip I would actually give you, instead of the let's just take a moment to breathe, because that's pretty hard to do, is to, well, actually two things. One is actually, while we're talking about that, determine what type of person you are, because actually if you are knackered, then taking a breath, practicing mindfulness is going to suit you for your stress relief, because you're already in that mellow zone. Whereas someone who's a doer, your high achievers, your high performers, people who are nearing burnout, which is actually over 50% of women and 25% of men, then you actually want stress relievers that are related to activity. So it might be using vocal cues, like actually screaming when you're doing something quiet, or exercising, or stamping your feet, or then doing something physical that's actually going to suit you. But the commonality between these two is mindset. And they've done some interesting studies on this to determine that it's how you view stress. So if you're seeing stress coming towards you, just like a bus, as this is something that's really terrible for me, I'm going to have a really stressful day, today is going to be a disaster, I'm so stressed, you're immediately putting a limit on yourself and on how you think. And they actually found that when you have that viewpoint, you actually don't engage in health positive behaviors. You procrastinate more, you're less productive, you have an inability to make decisions, or you make poor decisions. So the converse becomes changing your mindset. And what they did was they looked at, let me look at stress and actually not see this as something bad, but let me rise to the challenge and say, you know what, yeah, bring this on. Bring this on, because I have the ability to fight this. This is not something that needs to crush me. The other mindset trick is to determine that actually you're not the only one. So get a bit of a grip. And they actually did this mindset work with people to realize, well, if you decide that you're going to be like everybody else and crippled by stress, it puts you into victim mode and makes you less able to form decisions. And the third thing they looked at, which really propelled people, was to try and find meaning and opportunity in the stress, which is a lot of the work that I do with the clients that I work with, is to elevate them straight up. Yes, okay, there's stress. What could the benefits be? What's it trying to teach me? Where is the opportunity here? And it gives them more of a meaning and purpose, and it paves the way for more clarity. And by actually doing that, they found that people performed better, their health was better, they made more health conscious behaviors. And you talked about health. Yes, of course, stress increases your risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancers. It causes headaches. It causes you to be ill more of the time. It affects your immune system. But it really affects your relationships as well. So just tacking on to what you were just talking about with loneliness just now, it really impacts on your relationships. So you're more likely to experience a lack of libido, lack of intimacy, lack of good communication with your partner, with your children. You're showing up as someone who is not really the true you.
Yeah, gosh, there's so much there to unpack. The whole way of how you see stress, to me, that's the pearl, if you like, of wisdom there. Can we learn bad ways or negative ways of looking at stress from our parents? I'm thinking, if for instance, your mum or your dad always saw Mondays as, oh, it's terrible, you learn as a child that happens on a Sunday night, without stopping, questioning it. Where has this come from? And dealing with it, actually looking at it, as you said, head on, rather than just passing something down, or a view of stress, or a view of a particular thing. Christmases are always fraught because when the relatives come up, because that's the way mum and dad saw it, and their mum and dad saw it. Actually stopping and challenging that view of how they saw stress and reframing it.
Exactly. So that you said some very key words there, and it was about taking the time to question. And what happens is we go through life. I like to use this phrase, particularly at our boot camps, where it's like, we're going to take the blindfolds off, because most of the time people walk through life with a blindfold on. They just accept the way they are. They're bombarded by stimuli, especially nowadays, more and more and more. So there's no time to have that regenerative phase, but they don't ever take the time to question. They often don't feel they even have the time or the opportunity to question. So are those beliefs yours? Where did those beliefs come from? Are they beliefs that you actually want? Are they your truth, or are they universal truth? Are they serving you? What do you want to do about it? If you want to change, how are you going to change to your benefit, to yourself, and then to other people? So it's about changing the filters, and that, of course, is all habits. Micro habits. A habit is the way, not just the way you act. A bad habit like going to bed late, if we're going to stay on that poor health behavior and stress strategy there. But it's about thinking. How do you think? Because how you think and what you choose to believe is a habit. And the word there is choose, that you can actually change what you choose to believe. And the more you develop that habit, the more that then becomes part of you. And the more we stretch you, you'll never be able to go back there again. I just really like to touch on one more really interesting thing that I discovered in my research that I actually started 20 years ago looking at stress. And it was about looking at people's ability to respond to instruction under periods of stress, which is why what you said, I can't tell you to sit there and breathe and be healthier when you're under, and go to bed earlier, because actually when you're stressed and someone tells you what to do, you're actually going to feel much worse about it. And this is what our research found. The ability to take on health positive behaviors was very poor. But what was interesting is those people didn't actually necessarily have high levels of cortisol, which are the main stress hormone that we're talking about when we're talking about chronic stress. And what I've often found is when people turn around and say, I don't do stress, they're actually the ones who are more chronically ill. So there's a real difference to how you think with that behavior change, because they're actually the people who are acting as if stress doesn't exist at all. So they're actually using up more energy to propel it away from them. And by doing that, again, the studies show those people actually have higher levels of divorce and depression.
That's it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. But so I'm looking at number one is actually so many people become comfortable with discomfort. They would rather deal with the stress of not changing than their perceived stress of changing. It is an interesting one of actually putting on the brakes. And I'm guilty of it as well. I mean, when I have moments of enlightenment when I say to myself, why does it have to be that way? Whoa, hang on. Who says? Who is this everybody who said everybody's doing this? Or who is this they? What are the expectations I'm stressing myself out to achieve? Who set them? Who set them? Who said? And it's almost that kid-like thing, isn't it? When we're children, we'll say, who says? Maybe we need to do that more when it comes to stress.
Yeah, absolutely. You do need to challenge it. So this kind of goes beyond just the stress issue and the impact and the effect that it has on us, which of course is massive within the population. But let's not forget the way things are right now is that ability, or the inability, I should say, to be able to shut down. You can't switch off from electronics. You can't get away from blue light. There is a constant bombardment of stimulus. And even that is actually a stress. Exercise, for example, is a stress. It's just you'd think it was a good stress, but if you exercised every day to the point where you stressed your body out and never gave yourself any recovery time, you would actually potentially start to feel ill and have those ill effects that we associate with stress, such as the constant fatigue or the brain fog. So exactly as you said, creating, I like to call it, rather than, because I don't like you to think that you're going to limit yourself, you shouldn't need to limit yourself. But when you really know your truth, when you really know yourself, when you're able to tap into your intuition and intuitively understand what's good for you and what you truly want in life and who you truly are at your core, your authenticity, your values, how you want to live your life, then what happens is you don't get swayed by other people's expectations, which is a stress. You're able to have boundaries, you're able to communicate effectively, you're able to make decisions that are in favor of how you want to live your life, which is exactly what you were saying. Who said I should be doing this? The challenge comes, of course, in the work situation, right? When you're running a business, or when you're in a leadership position, or even when you are any type of employee, because there are expectations placed upon you. But again, this comes about by being able to lay down the expectations, understand what's expected of you, but also communicate back what you expect. So it's about valuing yourself in return and having enough confidence to be able to communicate that in such a way that then anything that people bombard you with, you're able to bat it back rather than internally feeling under pressure. I have this phrase, I want to get a t-shirt made for it, outwardly successful, inwardly stressful.
Oh, thank you so much to take away from that. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. And there's lots, if you go on, there's lots of websites. If you type in stress there, because as I said before, it's Stress Awareness Month, and have a look at Dr. Rana Al-Falaki's website.